The cool mountain air carried the scent of pine and freshly cut cedar as I leaned against the old fence post, wiping a thin sheen of sweat from my brow. The rhythmic sound of my wife Emily's hammer striking the nails into the new gate echoed through the forest, blending perfectly with the distant call of a woodpecker tapping on a hollow trunk. "Hand me that last plank, will you?" Emily called, her auburn hair catching the midday sun, glowing like copper. I grabbed the smooth wooden plank from the pile and walked toward her, smiling as I admired her work. The gate was a masterpiece, a solid wooden barrier stained in deep walnut, with clean metal hinges and a perfectly carved centerpiece bearing our initials, J&E. It was sturdy, practical, and had a rustic charm that matched the cabin my grandfather had built with his own 2 hands decades ago. "This is perfect," I said, watching her secure the final nail. "Grandpa would have loved this." Emily smiled softly and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "It feels right, you know. Like we're making this place ours, but still keeping his spirit here." I nodded, feeling the quiet peace that always came when we spent time up here in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The cabin wasn't just a structure to us, it was a sanctuary, a slice of land far removed from the chaos of city life. Surrounded by towering pines and whispering maples, it was the one place where we could truly breathe. But that peace, like clockwork, never lasted long when the HOA was involved. The first sign of trouble was the unmistakable crunch of gravel under tires. Emily and I exchanged a look, the sound shattering the serenity like a rock through glass. Sure enough, the moment I turned toward the road, I saw it, a shiny white SUV crawling slowly toward the entrance, its windows tinted just enough to look menacing. "Oh no," Emily muttered, setting her hammer down on the workbench. "Not today," I sighed, already recognizing the driver even before the SUV came to a stop in a puff of dust. Out stepped her, Karen Mitchell, the self-proclaimed queen of the Homeowners Association. Perfectly coiffed blonde bob, oversized designer sunglasses perched on her nose, a pastel pink blouse tucked neatly into pressed white pants, and of course, her ever-present clipboard clutched tightly in her manicured hands. She didn't walk so much as storm toward us, her heels clicking sharply on the gravel road as if to announce her presence like a royal decree. "What is this?" she shrieked, jabbing a French manicured finger toward the gate we'd just finished installing. Emily blinked, momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity. "What is what?" she asked cautiously. "This," Karen gestured wildly at the beautiful wooden gate. "This thing. This, I saw. It is not the approved design for gates in this community." I set down the tool in my hand and took a slow step forward, keeping my voice calm. "This gate is on our property. We built it ourselves. It doesn't need anyone's approval." Karen scoffed so hard I half expected her sunglasses to fall off. "Don't play dumb. Code 3.2a, subsection 4. Gates must be black wrought iron, 6 feet tall, and approved by the board before installation. It's standard. You can't just build whatever you want. This isn't some lawless backwoods. This is an HOA regulated community." I folded my arms across my chest. "Ma'am, this property isn't part of your HOA. It's been in my family for decades. Long before the HOA even existed." She blinked, then actually laughed, the kind of sharp, condescending laugh that made my jaw tighten. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. Every home in a 5-mile radius falls under our jurisdiction. When you bought this place, you signed the contract, just like everyone else." Emily stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We didn't buy this place. It's been in my husband's family since before your bylaws, your patrols, and whatever else you think you're running here." Karen froze for a moment, clearly not expecting that answer, but quickly recovered, adjusting her sunglasses like armor. "Well," she said with a snide tilt of her chin, "if you don't have the proper paperwork exempting this property, then it's still subject to community rules. And that means this gate," she pointed at it like it was a crime scene, "has to come down today, or you'll face a fine of $5,000. Emily's mouth fell open. $5,000? For building a gate on our own land? Karen tilted her head, lips curling in a smug smile. "Actions have consequences. I'll give you until the end of the day to comply." I couldn't help it. A slow smile spread across my face, not one of humor but a disbelief. "Let me get this straight," I said, stepping closer until we were only a few feet apart. "You're telling me, on my land that's been in my family since before you could spell HOA, that you have the right to fine me for putting up a gate that keeps people like you out?" Karen's eyes flashed with something sharp, like a predator cornered. "You don't understand how this works," she hissed, pulling her phone out of her designer handbag. "But you're about to." And then, right there in the middle of the road, she dialed 911. Emily's jaw dropped. "You have got to be kidding me." Karen turned her back to us, speaking into the phone in an exaggerated tone. "Yes, hello, this is Karen Mitchell, president of the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. I'm reporting trespassers at, she rattled off the address like a pro. They've illegally modified the gate on HOA controlled property and are refusing to comply. Send someone immediately. I stared at her, almost impressed by the sheer gall. Trespassers, I muttered under my breath, looking at Emily, who was shaking her head in disbelief. Karen spun back toward us, phone still pressed to her ear. You think you can just ignore the rules, but that's not how it works here. This community has standards, and people like you don't get to just waltz in and tear them down. Emily's hands curled into fists at her sides. People like us. Karen didn't blink. Outsiders who think they can do whatever they want. Well, the law is on my side. I stepped forward again, calm but firm. Karen, you really don't want to do this. Oh, I do, she snapped, voice dripping with venom. You'll learn soon enough. No one disrespects my HOA. I exchanged a look with Emily, a silent conversation passing between us. She raised an eyebrow, the corner of her mouth twitching with a suppressed smile. If only Karen knew who we really were. The sharp wail of distant sirens cut through the calm mountain air, growing louder as the seconds ticked by. Emily crossed her arms, leaning casually against the new gate, her calm expression a sharp contrast to Karen, who stood stiffly at the roadside, tapping one impatient heel against the gravel like a metronome. You're going to regret this, Karen said, her tone icy and self-assured, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease when I didn't react. I didn't answer her. Instead, I glanced at Emily, whose lips were curved into a small, knowing smile. She looked almost amused. Don't look at me like that, Karen snapped, voice sharp as glass. When the sheriff gets here, you'll be cited, fined, and, if I have any say in it, removed from this property. Nobody defies the HOA. Nobody. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Nobody defies the HOA. She had no idea who she was talking to. The gravel crunched again, and a sheriff's cruiser came into view. The flashing blue lights reflecting off the towering pines. It slowed to a stop behind Karen's gleaming white SUV. The officer stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered in his khaki uniform, his mirrored sunglasses catching the midday sun as he scanned the scene. Karen immediately sprang into action, striding forward like a general reporting for duty. Officer, she called, voice pitched high with righteous indignation. She gestured wildly toward Emily and me, her nails glittering under the sunlight. Thank goodness you're here. These people are illegally modifying a gate on HOA-controlled property. I've tried to explain the rules to them, but they're belligerent and non-compliant. They need to be removed immediately. I want them cited, no, arrested. Emily tilted her head slightly, crossing one leg over the other, her posture casual, unbothered. I stayed silent, letting Karen dig her own grave. The officer adjusted his hat and stepped forward, scanning me for a moment before his eyes landed on Emily. Something shifted in his expression, though Karen, too caught up in her own drama, didn't notice. Ma'am, the officer said, voice calm but firm, why don't you take a step back and let me talk to the property owners? Karen bristled, her face reddening. Property owners, she barked. I am the president of the Cedar Ridge HOA. This is an HOA issue, and this land is under our jurisdiction. I have every right to enforce compliance here. They're violating multiple sections of our bylaws, and if you won't do your job, I will escalate this to the county level. The officer finally removed his sunglasses, and his eyes met mine. Recognition flickered there, followed by a slow, respectful nod. Colonel Thompson, he said evenly. Didn't realize you were back in town, sir. Karen froze mid-rant, blinking rapidly as the words registered. Colonel, what? Emily, calm as ever, smiled politely. It's been a while, deputy, she said warmly, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone used to being respected. The deputy straightened instinctively, his demeanor shifting from professional neutrality to outright deference. Judge Thompson, he said, nodding toward Emily. Welcome home, ma'am. Should have known when I saw the new gate, it's your family's property after all. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Her face drained of color, and the clipboard she'd been clutching slipped from her hand, landing in the gravel with a dull thud. Judge, she stammered. Emily's gaze was steady, unflinching. Yes, she said evenly, her tone sharp enough to cut through steel. I serve on the state circuit court. And this land has been in my husband's family for generations. Long before your little HOA decided to start policing things that don't belong to it. Karen's lips trembled, but no words came out. She just stared, wide-eyed, at the two of us like she was seeing ghosts. I stepped forward then, my hands still in my pockets, my voice calm but layered with steel. Karen, I said evenly, let me make something crystal clear. This property isn't, and never has been, under your jurisdiction. Your HOA has zero authority here. You had no right to step foot past the road, no right to harass my wife, and absolutely no right to call law enforcement over a gate on private land. Karen swallowed hard, her composure slipping with every word. I didn't know, she stammered, the confidence draining from her like water down a drain. No one told me. The deputy's gaze hardened as he turned toward her. Ma'am, he said, his voice sharp now, this isn't your concern. You've trespassed and filed a false report. That's a serious offense. If the Thompsons wanted to press charges, you'd be in the back of my cruiser right now. Karen looked like she might faint. I just thought. You thought wrong, I said, my voice low and even, leaving no room for argument. The deputy stepped closer, lowering his voice slightly but still audible. Sir, ma'am, I'll file a report noting the false claim. If you want, I can issue a formal trespass warning against her and anyone else from the HOA. Emily shook her head slowly, though her eyes never left Karen's pale, shaken face. Not today, she said, her voice steady but icy. But if she ever steps foot on this land again without our permission, then we'll revisit that. Karen nodded quickly, her head bobbing like a puppet on strings. Why yes, of course. I'll make sure the board knows. There won't be any more confusion. Good, Emily said, her smile sharp but controlled. Because I'd hate for you to learn the hard way what happens when you ignore a judge's orders. The deputy nodded once more, tipped his hat to us, and headed back toward his cruiser. Karen stumbled back toward her SUV, fumbling with her keys as she climbed in. The roar of the engine filled the silence as she drove off, leaving a trail of dust in her wake. When the road was finally quiet again, Emily turned to me, one eyebrow arched and a wry smile tugging at her lips. Well, she said, brushing her hands together, that was dramatic. I chuckled, shaking my head. Dramatic is one word for it. She leaned against the gate we had worked so hard to build, her expression softening. Do you think she'll try anything again? Not a chance, I said, glancing down the empty road. Not after today. She just got a very loud wake-up call. Emily laughed softly, the sound carrying through the trees. Good, because the only people allowed to bother me up here are the deer that keep eating my roses. I slipped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close as we walked back toward the cabin, the late afternoon sun dipping lower behind the ridgeline, painting the world in shades of golden amber. The mountains were quiet again, peaceful. But there was a new sense of satisfaction in that stillness, the kind that comes when someone tries to test you and finds out, very quickly, that they picked the wrong people to mess with. As we reached the porch, Emily paused and looked back at the gate, now standing proudly against the backdrop of pine and maple trees. You know, she said with a smirk, I almost feel bad for her. I raised an eyebrow. Almost, she echoed, a mischievous glint in her eye. But then I remember how she called the cops on me for changing a gate on our land, and, no. Not even a little. I laughed, shaking my head as I unlocked the cabin door. Fair enough. Here's to a quiet evening, and maybe a little less drama tomorrow. But deep down, I knew the story of Karen versus the Thompsons would be whispered around the neighborhood for years to come, a cautionary tale about the day the HOA learned there are some lines you don't cross, and some people you simply don't underestimate.